when should the compliance declaration actually be issued? So the question is whether it's prior to the completion inspection by your approved inspector or post-inspection. That's probably one for me, actually, I would have said. So, I mean, we've had discussions on this, and the answer that we would put is that the declaration should come in prior to the actual inspection. The inspection will then be undertaken, and obviously if there are any defects that are found on site, they would then be raised. Then a subsequent compliance declaration would then need to be issued post the inspection being carried out again. I know, Owen, you'll probably elaborate, because I know we were talking about this earlier. Yes. In terms of the reliance on Absolutely. The actual inspection itself.
Yeah, and I think, again, going back to the duty holder responsibilities is clear on this, that the principal contractor has the duty to ensure that the work complies with the building regulations. And so when building control come and do inspections, and if it is at the end of the project when building control come and do inspections, you shouldn't be relying on any list of items that building control produce as being the complete list of issues that need rectifying in terms of building regulation compliance. So your declaration of compliance at the end can't just be reliant upon anything that is identified by the building control surveyor on their inspection. You should be confident that the work complies in full with the building regulations, and that is what your declaration is for.
If the fit-out work is on a commercial premise and it's within a high-risk building, if it's an existing building and the commercial premise is a separate part, and the definition of a separate part is within the Building Safety Act, or the building regulations for high-risk buildings, that defines what a separate part is, and it's basically there's no connection between the commercial use and the residential use. So if it's an existing building and you're doing fit-out works to a commercial part, a commercial premise, which is a separate part, then that part of the build or that application doesn't need to go to the Building Safety Regulator. It can be approved by either ourselves as registered building control approvers or the local authority.
I think it's probably worth picking up on that, isn't it, Joe, that at initial construction of the building, then that commercial part of the building will be part of the application submitted to the Building Safety Regulator. So when the building is first built, the Building Safety Regulator will deal with all of that, that building, including the proposed commercial unit. Now there will be some questions as to when the commercial unit becomes that independent section or that separated part. And so I think we would want to be looking at having either a part final certificate or a completion certificate from the Building Safety Regulator in relation to that part before any fit-out work can be supervised by a local authority or an approved inspector. So the process from building new to fit out of a commercial premises, which is an independent section, will be critical upon that completion certification from the original build. Where it's work on an existing building, again, as Joe was saying, we need to look at that independent section and that separated part, and then the approved inspector or the local authority can be the building control body for the fit out of those commercial works.
Is it also worth running through, because I know we've had discussions as well, but where, and so that we make it clear that obviously where you go through the initial phase of the actual construction phase of the HRB, once that is then signed off, in terms of the actual works that we can do, in terms of where there's independent access, is it worth elaborating on that as well?
It is. It's
I'll throw you on.
No, that's all right. It's quite a complicated arrangement, but the higher risk buildings descriptions regulations talk about independent sections. And so independent sections, for the purposes of that description, is a section which does not either connect with the higher risk building part, or if there is a connection, say like an underground car park or something like that, that connection does not have any residential units in that part. So any connection between non-residential sections and the residential area, providing that doesn't have any residential units, then that will be described as an independent part. And we can see a lot of guidance on this in terms of how a higher risk building is registered with the Building Safety Regulator for occupation. And so there's lots of information and guidance on the government website about registering a higher risk building and the independent section.
So as a small builder, does the compliance declaration that does the compliance declaration that I have to sign actually mean?
Shall I pick up on that?
Yeah. You kick off.
I think what it means basically is that if you're a small builder and you've done the building work, if it's on a domestic scheme, then under the regulations you would be the principal contractor, regardless of whether you've formally been appointed on that or not, because the regulations say that for domestic client, the person who's actually undertaking the building work becomes the principal contractor. As a principal contractor, you are a duty holder and you've got the responsibility to plan, manage and monitor the building work to ensure compliance with the regulations. So that means that when you sign your declaration, you're complying, or you're signing that you've met your requirements under the regulations, under the requirements of a duty holder, and that you have fulfilled your duties to plan, manage and monitor the building work to ensure compliance with the building regulations. That's not just the work that you've done, it's every bit of work on that small extension. So it might be that you got a groundworking firm to come in and do the groundworks, some bricklayers to come in and do the brickwork, a plasterer to do the plastering work, electricians, plumbers, roofers, tilers, you name it. Anybody who's done any building work on that scheme, on that small domestic extension, you're signing on behalf of all the building work which has been undertaken. So please be aware, if you're a small builder, you're doing work on domestic schemes, you're by default the principal contractor, and at the point in time when you sign that compliance declaration, you're signing for all building work which is undertaken on there. And that's your duty as a principal contractor, to plan, manage and monitor all the building work to ensure compliance, and that's what you're actually signing for.
And I think really as well, Joe, that sort of highlights that the duty of the principal contractor is to ensure that those contractors collaborate and cooperate and carry out their own work such that it complies with the building regulations. So as the principal contractor, you may want to start to think about asking any subcontractors that you have to actually give you a declaration that their work complies with the building regulations, so that you can actually have some confidence from the work that they've carried out that the building work complies, and that overall you've carried out your duties under the building regulations to actually ensure that plan, manage, monitoring, collaboration and cooperation between all of the individual contractors involved has occurred, and that the building work does comply with the building regulations.
I think it's probably also important to say that obviously it's understandable that at the moment people are probably going to be concerned and slightly wary of these, the compliance declaration and what they're actually issuing. Ultimately, it's no different to what people are doing in the industry already. If you're a builder and you're working on projects, you are naturally, through what you're providing as your end product to the client, you should be using your own due diligence. You should be, you're putting your name to that piece of work. Now you are going to manage and you are going to ensure that you've got the right subconsultants that are coming in, or the subcontractors that are working on that project. So this is just formalising it, and it's now putting that, okay, we've now got this declaration at the end, but it shouldn't be seen as a kind of hard stop for people or something that's going to pose issues. This should really be a case that we, or the industry, embraces this across the board, to be honest, to ensure that we are providing what the whole ethos of this is that we provide better buildings at the end of the project for people.
I think that's right, and that it emphasises that the technical requirements of the building regulations haven't changed. So what you were building before should have complied with the building regulations, and what you build now should comply with the building regulations, the technical aspects. The changes in these regulatory changes is about those processes and procedures, those roles and responsibilities are being clearly set out in duty holder roles, and making sure that the people who actually carry out the work actually declare that they have carried out the work in compliance with the building regulations, which you should already be doing anyway. And so that is really just a clarification of those roles and not a change in actually how you comply with the technical requirements even now.
So often when submitting a building regs application, neither the start date or the contractor is known. Is it possible to submit the application without knowing this level of information?
I think, sorry, that's a two-way part question here, but I think in terms of the start date, the start date is one of the bits of information that is required by building control before we can submit our initial notice. So from an approved inspector point of view, unless we know what the start date is or we've been given the start date, we can't submit the initial notice.
Can I jump in on that one, Joe?
I think I might intend that.
This is one of the problems with these changes, is they're using terminology that we've used in a different way previously, because what we need to know is an anticipated date of work being deemed as commenced, rather than the actual date you're going to start that building work. So if we remember, the work being deemed commenced is 15% of work described in the initial notice if it's internal alterations or material alterations, or it's the foundations and work up to the ground floor slab if you're doing an extension or building a new building. And so that we need to know when work will reach that stage of being deemed commenced, because if you don't reach that stage within 3 years of the initial notice being submitted, the initial notice or an application to the local authority will automatically cease to be in force. And this is where we're going to have to get used to different terminology, because the date when work starts, you have to give us notice of that, but we don't necessarily need to know that to submit the initial notice. But we need to know when you are planning to have executed sufficient work that the building work will be deemed commenced. And so again, it's just terminology, Joe.
And I think again with this, the dates which we'd be looking for there are estimates. If you don't know what they are, you probably have an estimate or give the best guess at that point in time. When the building initial notice or the building regulation application has been submitted, those dates can be changed at any point up until the point where you actually do start or commence work. So those dates can be changed and you can notify us of changes, but when the application is made, some dates need to be provided.
I think one of the things to add on to that as well, Joe, is potentially that notifying, because you notify us of that date, it also gives us the opportunity to come back to you and say, oh, you haven't told us that you've actually reached that stage of work yet. So, possibly 2 years, 6 months after we submitted the initial notice, we might come back to you and say, you told us you were hoping to commence work by this date. You haven't told us that you've commenced work. Your initial notice is going to lapse in 6 months' time. Have you actually reached that stage of work so that we can actually record that work as being commenced? and retain the initial notice. So it will help you as well in terms of managing your project and ensuring that your initial notice doesn't lapse automatically.
And then just going back to the final thing there about the contractor, again, if the contractor is not known at the point in time when the building regulation application is made, that information can be left blank, and we can get notified about that at a later date. But we should get notified of the contractor before the work commences on site.
I think we've probably closed that one out then on that basis. So next question then. As designers on the majority of projects, once we have obtained building regulations approval and provided plans and details to the client and the builder, we then have no further involvement on the project at all. Are we still required to somehow provide a declaration to confirm compliance with the as-built works?
I
was going to say, did you want to start on?
I can quickly do this one. I mean, this one should be actually quite straightforward, because as a designer or principal designer, because if you're the sole designer on the scheme or the lead designer on the scheme, you would normally be the principal designer as well. You're signing a declaration that the design that you've produced, should it be completed or constructed on site in accordance with that design, meets the requirements of the building regulations. That's what your compliance statement or compliance declaration is saying. So it's only for the design stage. If that design changes during the construction stage, then strictly speaking, the changes which are proposed should then get passed back to you as the principal designer. You should review them, ensure that you're satisfied with them, then resubmit them or reproduce your design, reissue drawings, and then that becomes the design which you're providing your statement to. If the contractor changes any of the design and the design isn't delivered to site and there are differences between what the design which the principal designer has produced and what's being built on site, then that's where the principal contractor takes the responsibility for any design changes there. So as a designer, you're only providing a design statement. You're not necessarily taking a construction or making a construction declaration unless you've been appointed for some sort of contractor or principal contractor role as well.
I think if we can add on to that as well, during the presentation slides, if we remember, it's important to notify building control during the project when the principal designer changes, or when the principal designer's commission or contract comes to an end, because under the declarations of compliance at the end of the project, then the principal designers should put on their details the date that they were appointed and the date that their appointment ceased. And so you will be only responsible while you are appointed as the principal designer. And so it's important to keep those records of when you were appointed and when your appointment came to an end. And it's also important to know that notification of any end of appointment of a principal designer or principal contractor should be given to building control as well. So, you know, as a principal designer, again, you should understand the duties of a client duty holder, and that one of the duties of the client is to give notification to the to building control. On that notification of principal designer and principal contractor changing, then if that is given by the principal designer or the principal contractor, it has to be supported by a statement signed by the client to say that that information is correct. So it is the client's duty to keep building control up to date with who is the principal designer and who is the principal contractor. If they fail to do that, the principal designer or principal contractor can notify building control, but they also need to get the client to sign that statement to say that that information is correct. So again, it's running through the whole project of keeping building control informed of who are the duty holders and at what stage are they the duty holders.
Yeah, so I think just following on from that slightly as well, because I go back to obviously where we're looking at the small scale builder. a prime example of that would be if they are initially the contractor, or there's a contractor initially appointed on the project. For whatever reason during the course of that project, there might be a breakdown in the relationship between client and contractor. They no longer work on that scheme. The new contractor coming in, and this is where the dates are crucial on this basis, because the new contractor would be appointed from that date.
Yes.
So of course it's quite clear to demonstrate where they are responsible for the works. And then of course we have the clear dates there as well, don't we? So it's a crucial element of that side of things.
It is. That notification is very important because at the end of the project, those declarations are from each principal designer involved, each principal contractor involved, and building control are going to be comparing the notifications they've received during the works and the declarations that they receive at the end to make sure that we've got the declarations from all the principal designers and principal contractors involved in the project.
Who is certifying the competencies of a building control inspector? I think we can all give a fair input on this. I mean, it's obviously poignant at the moment because obviously the building control industry is going through quite a change. So basically, as a registered building control inspector, you are, or we are as individuals, going to be going through self-registration in terms of our own licenses, which will mean we will be working on certain levels of projects. So there's different classes associated with that, and it will basically mean that the competency of a building control surveyor is such that he can only work, or they can only work, on a certain project that they have proven that they've got competency to do so. There's several professional bodies that are obviously taking part in this. I know, Owen, you'll probably diversify on this a bit more, but it's basically ongoing at the moment, and as I know Owen touched on earlier, but by April we should all be registered individually. I'll let you.
So as Shane says, we're all individually going to be registered with the Building Safety Regulator. Currently, there are 3 schemes that have been approved for assessing the competence of each individual building inspector. And so there's a CABE scheme, Chartered Association of Building Engineers. They've got 1 scheme. There's a scheme called the Building Safety Competence Foundation. And there's a scheme called the Building Control Competence Assessment Scheme. So those 3 schemes have been assessed by the Building Safety Regulator and have been approved as being able to check and assess the competency of individuals. So as individuals, Shane, Joe and myself are all going to have to apply to one of those schemes, submit our evidence of our competence, either sit an exam or have an interview to demonstrate, to confirm that evidence and to confirm our competence, and those schemes will then give us an assessment and a classification which we can then submit to the Building Safety Regulator when we register as an individual.
I think it's probably important to say as well that building control are the first real stage or first sort of sector within the industry that are going through this, but it's quite clear, I know you've touched on the frameworks already, but this will go out across the board to other industry, you know, architectural practices, etc. are all going to go through this competency review to ensure that basically no one is working on buildings that they haven't proven and got the suitable competency to do so.
Indeed. I mean, we're already aware that RIBA are looking at a scheme for architects to demonstrate their competence, and the demonstration of competence is going to be an ongoing matter. So as a registered building inspector, we will have to re-register every 4 years, and we will have to keep records of our CPD, our continuing professional development, records of the type of work that we work on to demonstrate that we are maintaining our competence. But as Shane says, this is going to ripple out through the industry over the coming years, because as part of the Building Safety Regulator, one of the statutory committees that has been set up is the Industry Competence Committee. And the Industry Competence Committee is required to promote competence within the industry, encourage industry to demonstrate its competence, and to report back to the Building Safety Regulator to say how well industry is doing on demonstrating its competence. If industry doesn't do very well, I can see in the future that the Building Safety Regulator could start to take more steps to try and promote that competence assessment and competence demonstration.
Right, well, I'm very sorry, but we are out of time now. If you have any more questions, please do get in touch with us. That could be your local team, whoever you usually talk to for building regulations approval at either Socotec, Shore or Quadrant, and we should be able to help answer those questions at those local levels. If you haven't already seen them, please check out our YouTube videos and subscribe to our newsletters. And if you do that, you will get our latest updates on all changes to the Building Safety Act, the building regulations, and the whole area around what we've been talking about today. You can go onto our website at Shore, Socotec or Quadrant and be able to click on the link there to subscribe and to our newsletter, and also there will be links to the YouTube channel there as well. So thank you again everybody for watching and for your engagement in this webinar today. We've had over 600 viewers on the call today, and also over 300 questions have been submitted. So we're going to have a wonderful time over the next 3.5 months answering all those questions. We really do try to answer those questions, and we'll put those answers back onto the website for people to pick up on a later date. So thank you again everybody for viewing, and I think we're just going to say thank you and goodbye.